Welcome back to the countdown. Now that I've got the hockey crowd happy, um, anyways, let's get back to the movie countdown. I got this shirt today at Hot Topic, and I think it's awesome. Jason Lives, and it's got the print on this is huge. Like it goes down past my waist. It's just awesome. I got this one, and I also got um, the other one I got was you got Trivium.
Star Wars.
I got a Star Wars one for Last Jedi as well. Because I looked at that and I'm like, I need a Last Jedi shirt. Because people love The Last Jedi. So now I have a Last Jedi shirt. Um, Jason Lives, though, of course, the Friday the 13th, the good guy. Just watch the movie in reverse. He's this guy that comes out of the water and pulls machetes out of children. And then they go home. At the end of the movie, they go home. It's this wonderful, great story about a guy who takes machetes out of kids. 30. So we're into the top 30. We're into my favorite movies. And The Crow takes its place at 30. The Crow has a great soundtrack, a great feel, a great atmosphere, and it inspired way too many people to try to copy The Crow. The Crow was this magical thing, and Brandon Lee dying while it was being filmed made it more controversial, more talked about, and it is a crying shame because Brandon Lee was genius. This movie showed that he was actually a really, really good actor. And again, because of the subject matter of the movie and because of the genre it's in, it never got the respect when it came out that it really should have. No Academy Award nominations for movies that are actually, I don't know, special effects and good. You have to be just good. No special effects. You have to be just good. So, The Crow, for me, is a movie that I don't think was necessarily appreciated enough in its time, in its run. And it's had a really nice long run since it came out. So, if you haven't seen it, why haven't you seen it? Watch it. Don't watch City of Angels, which is the sequel. Just get the soundtrack to City of Angels because it's fantastic. But just the original Crow is a beautiful, haunting, wonderful movie, and the performances from top to bottom in this movie are done really really well, and it builds up to its climax. The climax is done perfectly. There are some very off color jokes done by Brandon Lee that are done well. I actually really really enjoyed this movie. So there you go. The Crow at 30. At 29, Demolition Man. That's right. Demolition Man, the movie with Sylvester Stallone, Wesley Snipes, and Sandra Bullock. Sandra Bullock in this movie is absolutely so cute and so believable as the cop that doesn't swear. There's no swearing in society, and it's silly. It's really silly, and it leads to a great rant by Dennis Leary, and it leads to some really fantastic wordplay throughout the whole movie, and the verbal credits for the morality statute, classic. Um, I remember the first time I watched this movie, I went into it with no expectation because I hadn't enjoyed a Sylvester Stallone movie in a while. I hadn't liked Cobra. I thought that one was just crap. I had not liked Over the Top. I hadn't liked a lot of his stuff, and so Demolition Man came out, and I'm like, oh, it's him and Wesley Snipes. And I always found Wesley Snipes kind of off-putting in a lot of movies too. You'll notice there's no Blade movies in here because I'm not a big Wesley Snipes fan. But in this movie, something happens. I love Wesley Snipes' character in this, Simon Phoenix. I absolutely love the character played by Sylvester Stallone, which is John Spartan, and Edgar Friendly, played by Dennis Leary. The fact that I remember the names of the characters tells you how much I enjoy the movie. Um, don't you have someone to kill? Like there's so many great words, and of course Jesse Ventura is one of the henchmen, because of course he is. Jesse Ventura is a henchman? Yes, of course. Sign me up. He was in Running Man too. Jesse Ventura, and he was in Predator, which is not on my list, but he was in Predator. Jesse Ventura had actually a half decent acting career after his wrestling career was over, and props to him for that. Because Jesse Ventura, while he was a known entity in the '80s, when he during his time as a wrestler, it was before Hulkamania really became Hulkamania, so he wasn't really as well known as he would have been if he'd wrestled a few years later. Not like Roddy Piper. So, yeah, Demolition Man, great movie. I can't recommend it enough. 28's going to be one that people argue with me about. I gave this movie a glowing review. This was one of the first reviews I did on this channel. Star Trek Beyond. One of my first dates with Yvonne was to take her to this movie. I was like, you haven't seen this movie? We gotta go see this movie. We have to see this movie. Star Trek Beyond does something fantastic, and it does something that when I first saw it in the trailer, and again, the trailer gives up too much. Trailers and movies give up way too much, and Star Trek Beyond shows it, because during every commercial, they show you the spaceship blown up. They show you that the Enterprise gets destroyed, and I really think that if they'd kept that out of the trailers, you could show them on the planet, not talk about why they're on the planet, just show them on the planet. And then it would have been a shock to people. They would have been like, holy crap, they blow up the Enterprise in this one. But nah, we'll just put it in the commercial. We'll put everything in the commercial, because if we don't put it in the commercial and the trailers, people aren't going to want to watch it. Well, as it turns out, Star Trek Beyond didn't do particularly well at the box office because of where it was in proximity to its budget. So now Star Trek 4 apparently has Tarantino directing it, and apparently instead of following this movie, they're going to go... They might go into the alternate universe, and... Star Trek Beyond is a perfect Star Trek movie. It tells a Star Trek story. It would work perfectly well as an episode of Star Trek or Star Trek Next Generation. It could be a two-parter. It would be great on the small screen or the big screen. And the best movies of Star Trek really are the ones that would work on the small screen as well as the big screen. And before anybody says, well, you can't do the big ones in the small screen, there were a couple of Borg two-parters that would have been great movies. Best of Both Worlds would have been a fantastic movie. So yes, a good two-parter on Star Trek makes a good movie here, and a good movie here makes a good two-parter on Star Trek. It is one of the very few, it may be the only franchise I can think of that works really, really well on the small screen and the big screen. Star Wars isn't there yet. We haven't seen that live-action series that actually captures the imagination of Star Wars and matches with the movies. And Marvel's comics, so I don't put that in the same, because it's different. Comics, you can kind of just adapt them to whatever. Star Trek was a TV thing and became a movie thing, and it got better as a movie thing, which made it better as a TV one as well. Once the movies were a success, Star Trek Next Generation came out, and Star Trek Next Generation is fantastic. Star Trek Beyond feels like a really good episode of Star Trek Next Generation. 27. We're going back to the 80s. Ghostbusters. And it's more than a song. Ghostbusters is one of those funny movies. So I hadn't seen it in a long time. I hadn't seen it in years. And then I'm like, all right, well, I'll watch it. So I plugged it in and started watching it. And I'd forgotten just how good it is. I'd forgotten how good the dialogue was. And I'd forgot how silly it wasn't. That Ghostbusters takes the source material and the subject matter, and it takes it seriously. So it takes the whole chasing ghosts thing seriously. There's jokes all the way through. It's a comedy movie, but it takes the actual subject matter very seriously. Zool is taken seriously, even though it's kind of silly. And the cast is fantastic from top to bottom, and everything that happens in this movie is kind of amazing. And it builds really, really well. It even makes Rick Moranis entertaining, which is not easy. But that's an inside joke for a friend of mine I used to work with. Rick Moranis, it doesn't matter. But Ghostbusters is one of those movies that I think is iconic. And then when they decided to remake it, and I looked at the cast, and people always say, well, it's just people got mad at it because it's women. No. This had nothing. The fact that the reboot of this, and it was a reboot, let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't reimagining or alternate universe, whatever the hell they tried to call it. They didn't want to call it a reboot. They did. The reboot focused on the goofy part. It didn't take the source material seriously at all. That's why it failed. And all of the characters tried to be the characters from the original, but like really souped up goofy versions. And oh hey, now the girl that's supposed to be Egon, she might be gay because the actress is gay in real life. This is really funny. Melissa McCarthy is clearly, is she Venkman? Is she Ray? Like, I don't know, but either way, she's just goofy, and none of the source material is taken seriously. None of the subject matter is taken seriously, so it's impossible to take the movie seriously. I got through, I think, 2/3 of the remake, and I was like, I can't. I couldn't watch till the end because it was one joke after another, and none of them hit. None of them were any good. And Melissa McCarthy can be hilarious. Spy isn't on this list, but Spy is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, just as a pure comedy. And yet it's not on this list because it's hard to get on the list. But the Ghostbusters remake, no, that may be, I may do like 100 list of the most disappointing movies I've ever seen, which could be a fun list. Because there's going to be movies on that list that people like, but for me they were disappointing. But yeah, the Ghostbusters remake, absolutely right near the top. 26. Now there's rumors they're remaking this, and if they do, I'm going to be really angry. And then there's rumors that they're going to like reboot it, kind of, but they're going to make a part 3 again, even though we have a part 3. They're just going to make that part 3 not canon, and they're going to make a Terminator that follows part 2 because that was the good one. The original Terminator is a fantastic psychological thriller that is terrifying, that is entertaining in parts. So again, it's one of those, it's terror, 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 and then there's a joke to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. But much like It Follows in one of my more recent videos, the Terminator is this endless chase. Here we go. We're chasing after Linda Hamilton, and Sarah Connor's got to die, and that's all the Terminator knows. And the journey that goes on here, and it's so well done, and it's actually, if you look at it, the special effects, there are explosions in it. There are some pretty, for its time, the CGI of the Terminator once the skin's all gone, pretty good for its time. Now, I know by today's standards it looks kind of lame, but it was pretty good for its time in 1984. It's not a big movie though. It doesn't like blow up a budget at all, and that's what makes it so good. And I think where the later Terminator movies get it completely wrong is, oh, I know, we're gonna have this giant Terminator that's like 10 stories tall and looks like a transformer, and it's gonna have this noise before it fires, and it's gonna scare everybody and jump scares. How the hell did that sneak up on people? It's what, 10 stories tall? It'd be what, 11 billion tons? That snuck up on them? They go outside. Oh, look, there it is. Really? You didn't notice that? There's so many things wrong with every other Terminator movie except the first two. The second one's not in my top 200. It's a good movie. I enjoyed it. My problem with the second movie, and I know people are going to get on me about this, I felt it was paint by numbers. I felt that it was too, I could tell what was going to happen next. Like, okay, this. The plot points, I was ahead of the movie the whole way. So it's a fun movie. It's still got that chase aspect, but I was too far ahead of the movie, and I knew who was and who wasn't going to die. I could tell watching it. So it kind of took me out, and the original Terminator, I was genuinely really upset by one of the main characters dying at the end. I'm like, wait, seriously? No. He can't die, and then he's dead. And it's really upsetting to me personally when I enjoy a character and they die. Ask Ash vs. Evil Dead's end of season 2 that I haven't watched yet. Alright. Hey, that's a good segue, and it wasn't even intentional. If you're going to make people upset, by all means talk about movies that disappointed you. And remakes that disappointed you. And then make one of those remakes that disappointed people number 25 on your all-time list. Evil Dead 2013. I'm going to go back to my lovely wife sitting on the couch. Evil Dead, the 2013 version, when her and I started dating a year and a half ago, I made her watch it. I said, you have to watch this. This is a movie you have to watch. Evil Dead is relentless, and it's kind of creepy in parts. It's really quite gory. There's some pretty disgusting stuff that goes on in that cellar. There's an arm that gets cut off. There's a tongue that gets cut in half. There's a lot of blood that happens. And for me, I thought it was fantastic. And Jane Levy as Mia, I fell absolutely head over heels in love with her watching this movie. I watched it in the theater, I think three. It was 3 times for sure. It may have been 4 that I watched that movie in the theater. Just absolutely wonderful. And I did stay after the credits to see Bruce Campbell the first time I watched it, and made my family watch it the second time I went there, because I dragged the whole family with me, and we all sat and watched it. And that was years ago. And now I've got a new family, and I don't think I'd be allowed to drag them to this movie. I have a funny feeling that that would not be allowed.
Absolutely not.
That Evil Dead would probably be a little bit too intense for our 5-year-old. A little bit too intense for the 10-year-old.
It'd be too much for him, yeah.
And a little bit too entertaining for the 13-year-old.
Yes.
So on all 3 counts, probably not good. And I really don't think Yvonne would go to the theater or watch a movie like this with me.
I don't think so.
I think if a movie like that was coming out again, and they've been talking about making more Evil Dead movies, I think I'm going by myself. If you want to go with me to see an Evil Dead movie when it comes out in the theater, by all means mention it in the comment section below. We'll see what we can do when that happens. I don't know when it's going to happen, but there's too much money being made on Ash and the Evil Dead brand for them not to try it again. They have to try it again. They have to get him, Lucy Lawless, and somehow work this out and make it happen. But Evil Dead, the remake with Mia and the way they do it, and I know there's people who have problems with it, but for me it was just, it was awesome. It was kind of the perfect horror movie. And I've got problems with the defibrillator. Yes, the defibrillator scene is weird. And then it's like, oh, she's dead. And then, oh, she's up. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, no, it didn't work. Because my thought process was, oh, she's still a demon, but she's hiding her face from him. And as soon as he goes over to her, she's going to stick him in the heart. No, but Fede Alvarez was trying to do something different. And I applaud him for that. And the weird part is that Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell both loved this movie. They were with it all the way through. So was Rob Tappert. And then after some of the Evil Dead core audience weren't into this and started demanding the Ash character return and more of that Evil Dead, Sam Raimi went and did his own thing and kind of abandoned the idea of doing another Evil Dead with Mia, which is too bad because there are still rumors, Bruce Campbell hasn't ruled it out, that at some point Mia from this movie could run into Ash from Ash vs. Evil Dead, and that would be awesome. Jane Levy, yeah, she's kind of sort of just in this movie. There's just something about a woman being evil and cutting her tongue in half. I guess that I like that kind of thing. I don't know, something about that. I don't know, because yeah, I came out of the movie feeling weird, like, you know, she's a demon almost the whole movie, and yet she's kind of hot. 24. Superman 2, Christopher Reeves. Not the first one. The first one's not on the countdown. You know why? Because the first one's summarized in the second movie in the first half an hour. It's sort of like they looked at the first movie and they went, yeah, this movie's really stupid. Really, he turns the Earth backwards? Because turning the Earth backwards turns back time? Maybe when we do the second movie, we should just kind of pretend that didn't happen. And it's kind of what the second movie does. It kind of shows you again his origin story, and it talks about... it gets more into what happened to the villains that you see in the first movie getting sent away. And of course, Kneel Before Zod comes from that movie. Kneel Before Zod. And I remember watching Smallville when that line was thrown out, and I was like, Kneel Before Zod, yes! And then when Man of Steel came out and they brought it up, and I'm like, oh... Because Man of Steel was terrible. I think what gets Superman, and again, I'm going to go back to Ghostbusters. What makes Superman 2 work is the same thing with Ghostbusters. Superman 2 understands it's got a silly premise, but it takes it seriously. It understands that it's going to have some comedic moments for you to get through it, but again, it takes it seriously. Ghostbusters did the same thing. The new Superman movies took a silly premise and went, we got to make this dark. Zack Snyder has shown us the way. With Watchmen, that movie that people didn't really like, we're going to do our entire DC universe like Watchmen. You know, that movie people didn't really like. I liked Watchmen, but I know a lot of people that didn't. And I like Watchmen. I don't love Watchmen. I love Superman 2. Lois Lane, fantastic. All of the characters in this movie are fantastic. This is where Gene Hackman was at his best as Lex Luthor. And when he tries cutting deals, and then when those deals are falling through and he's ready to cut other deals with other people, he's so slimy. and cowardly, and yet he is still perfect as Lex Luthor. And he's never portrayed properly again after this movie. Lex Luthor has not been done right in a movie since Superman 2. And I would argue that on Smallville, he was done right until the stupid decision to kill Lex off, and then anything they did after that where they tried to create Lex-like characters just didn't work. It just didn't work. Lex Luthor done right is fantastic. Lex Luthor done wrong or by other people is just awful. So unless you're Michael Rosenbaum or Gene Hackman, you just can't be Lex Luthor. That's basically the whole thing. 23. The greatest soundtrack in the history of movies. Highlander. Queen knocks it right out of the park, right off the bat. They're at a wrestling event, and Princes of the Universe comes on, and you got the fabulous Freebirds in the ring with, I know Tony Gurria was one of the other three wrestlers, Tonga Kid, who I believe was Rikishi later, and I'm trying to remember the third guy. Just to look like a smartass, I was going to remember all three. I want to say, not Barry Gordy, not Michael Hayes. Crap. The guy who could actually work of the Freebirds. No, because they're against the Freebirds. Oh, okay, that's going to drive me nuts. I'll just say Paul Roma, because most people won't even know who that is. So, Paul Roma. Sure, yeah, we'll go with that. Jim Powers. Highlander. Fantastic movie. Christopher Lambert, I'd never heard of him before this movie, and after this movie I wanted to watch everything he was in, even though he wasn't in a whole lot. Christopher Lambert plays an immortal, and the only way to kill him is to cut off his head. And there's all these immortals running around having fights, and the last one that wins gets the prize. And the prize is this elusive, weird thing that's only kind of half explained. And then they decided to make Highlander sequels, which was a really horrible idea. They made a Highlander series, which wasn't bad. It wasn't bad, but it was still kind of stupid, because I'm watching Connor's cousin, and the whole time thinking, yeah, but you have to die because Connor's the one that gets the prize. And that's all I kept thinking in my brain. I couldn't get past that, which is too bad, because Highlander was a pretty decent series. But the original movie was fantastic. Never see Highlander 2. I would prefer that people light themselves on fire than watch Highlander 2, because they decide that the Highlander and all of the other immortals are aliens from another planet, and they have to fight against these aliens who kind of look like they're chickens, and they've got these weird swords. And if you watch Highlander 2, which I highly don't recommend, during a fight scene, Connor's sword changes to one of the chicken guy's swords and then changes back. And I watched it, the first time I watched it with a friend of mine, and right away we're like, why is he fighting chickens? And then we were watching, and he goes, wait, and he paused it, and he goes, Connor's got the chicken sword. And I was like, holy crap, he's got the chicken sword. How bad. How horrible. So no matter what they do, and they've tried re-editing it to get the alien chicken people out of it, no matter what they do, they can't undo Connor fighting with a chicken sword. They can't. They just can't. And it's stupid. And it was a dumb excuse like, oh, there's a fire. Oh, now he's young again. Why? Why is he young again? Why is he young again? Why does that happen? People are gonna go home and light themselves on fire thinking it makes themselves young. And really, in reality, they're still better off than watching Highlander 2. Stupid. 22. This is also 80s, and it shows my age, but I don't care. Because everything shows my age, whether it's the lines on my face, or the hair I don't have, or the fact it's gray. The Last Starfighter, which is the first movie that was released in Hollywood that had CGI in it. And it's kind of awesome. The Last Starfighter is really sort of kind of amazingly awesome. I can't say enough good things about this. Catherine Mary Stewart, I will mention actress names a lot because there's a reason. Catherine Mary Stewart was based on her character in this movie and the next movie that I'm going to do on this countdown. I may have based characters on her in books I wrote for decades after these movies came out. Last Starfighter is amazing and funny and weird, and the CGI is pretty bad by today's standards. But again, if you watch it remembering, this was the first movie that had CGI. And there's a battle in it that's really clever and simple, and a villain that's very clever and simple, not an overly complicated villain, and you really hate the villain, and you really are pulling for the good guys in this, and there's some respect paid to the alien races in this movie too that I think's really kind of nice, and like it's not played for laughs, it's not goofy, and the prosthetics that some of these guys wear and some of the costumes, they're not goofy considering that it's an unknown entity, this Last Starfighter franchise that didn't become a franchise. But everything is done really well. The costumes are on point. The direction was really solid. Um, and just great acting all around. And some really goofy dialogue is made better by good acting. And the beta unit. If you haven't seen the movie, I'll just say the beta unit. If you've seen the movie, you understand. The beta unit kind of makes the movie. And his rapport with Maggie, which is the character played by Catherine Mary Stewart, is just awesome. And the fact that Maggie right away buys into the whole beta unit thing, that's my girl. That's Catherine Mary Stewart. So yeah, Last Starfighter gets 22. And 21 is going to be a movie you may not have heard of. Which is going to surprise so many people. I rented Night of the Comet every week. Every Thursday, that was my daily allowance, or weekly allowance from my grandmother. My grandmother gave me $3 a week. That's right. I was in my early teens, and my grandmother gave me an allowance of $3 a week. And sometimes I saved it for hockey cards. But for months, I would get that $3. And I mean, I did other things. I did other chores to get money here and there. I took carts back to the store. I used to do that because the manager would give me $1 per cart. Well, when it's $1 per cart, and you've got this huge area you can roam, I was finding carts all over the place. And the problem was that I found so many carts that eventually the manager started accusing me that I was taking carts and then bringing them back for the money. And I stopped doing it when he said that. Because why would I, for $1, I'm going to take it all the way down the street and then bring it all? Why would I do that? For $1? Holy crap. But my allowance went to that movie. It went to that movie enough that I have to explain this to the kids in the crowd. When you'd rent a movie, there would be a card. And you'd sign the card, you'd have your signature on it, you'd have your membership number, and they would stamp on the date that it had to be returned. So if you were late, they'd go, look, you signed this, and you knew that it was supposed to be returned by that date. Night of the Comet only had my name on an entire card. I would rent the movie every Thursday, bring it back every Friday, and then when it wasn't a new release anymore and I could have it for 2 days, I could watch it twice. I've memorized this entire movie. I may have watched that one too. And I may or may not have predicted the dialogue before it arrived, because it is just, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the comet, if it's the goofiness, if it's the fact that people turn into this red calcium dust when the comet goes by, or if it's that Catherine Mary Stewart was just in her perfection, or that Robert Beltran is in this. Robert Beltran, of course, was the first officer on Star Trek Voyager. So if you want to see him before he was on Star Trek Voyager, grab yourself Night of the Comet, and you're welcome. And just, there's not a lot of characters in this movie. So it's not like, and there's zombies in it, but they're not really zombies. So basically, the Earth passes through the tail of a comet. A light show not seen in 75 million years. Indeed, a coincidence. No, not since the dinosaurs disappeared. A coincidence to some, but some didn't see it as a coincidence. I don't remember the exact words. If I loaded it up right now, I would know the exact words of what the announcer says at the start. That's all creepy, ooh, and literally with the ooh music in the background. And then they go into the party and everything's great. And I think they just filmed basically Times Square footage. So Times Square, and they made it like, oh, this is a big Comet party. So they had like Comet party up on the scroll or whatever. And it's this simple story of two sisters who survive the comet wiping out most life on Earth. So if you're exposed to the comet, you turn to dust. If you're partly exposed to the comet, you start turning to dust, and there's no way to stop that process. But as you gradually dissolve, you lose your mind, you go crazy, and you become like one of these crazed zombies, and you eat people. So these girls are protected and they're not exposed at all, so they're fine. But they wake up like, oh, they're zombies. But it's not like other zombie type movies, and technically they're sick and they're dying people, so they're still able to talk and they're still relatively mobile, but they're dissolving. And they don't get into that so much. This is only a PG-13 movie, so they just discuss it a little bit. There's a nightmare that a character has in the movie that's the scariest scene in the entire movie. It's just a nightmare, and it is pretty frightening the first time you watch it. But Kelly Maroney's in this as well. You may know her from Chopping Mall. Chopping Mall is a pretty good movie too, but doesn't qualify for the list because it doesn't go to 1,000. Chopping Mall would be pretty low on the list, but it's not as bad a movie as people might think. Night of the Comet is really fantastic. It fully belongs on this list, and I will defend that from now until the end of time. And if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. So I apologize for this movie list being longer, but I told you guys this would happen as I get up in the top 30, and I got to explain these movies a little more. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and thank you so much for all your support and for getting the word out about this channel, because getting close to 2,000 subscribers, getting kind of happy about that. And it's not just Jason lives, this channel lives, and it's going to live for a long time to come because of people like you watching and supporting the product. So thank you very much, and I will be back tomorrow to try to get the last 20 done, if we have enough time in the day to get the last 20 done. Thank you very much if you made it till the end, and I'll talk to you again later.